Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series, Explorations in Savitri, with our beloved Alok. Before we begin, I would just like to ask you all to remember Dr. Ghosh. He wanted to be here this evening, but his wife fell ill and was hospitalized very suddenly. Please remember him and her in your prayers. We are on page 380, about 6-7 lines down, and slow, hushed wizard nets of fiery bloom, environed with their colored snare, her wheels.
Yes, colored snare, her wheels. So this is the description of Savitri on her quest, and outwardly it's the symbol of the chariot going through the journey, but inwardly it's the journey of the divine looking for that soul caught in the meshes of ignorance. So this many colored, wherever we have many colored descriptions, they are the description of nature. At one place, Mother describes Mother Nature, material nature. She says she is ageless and she has a young face even though she is very old. And then she says she has many colored hairs. So, because she represents that. So as she is moving on the chariot, which is symbol of time, all movement is a symbol of time. And the spokes and the freight, how it is being woven, and all around her, different shades and moods of nature. So it operates simultaneously at multiple levels.
And it's very beautiful because you can see that the wheels are embraced by the flowers.
Yes,
and
that's
the plants.
it. Fiery bloom and warrened with their colored snare, her wheels, as if they are all asking, you stop here, you stop here. Snare, the suggestion of the word snare is, if you really look at it this way, that Savitri is in quest of her mate, ideal mate, then this snare, colored snare, becomes all the more significant that there are many outer suggestions and appearances which are trying to call her chariot to halt. But she is going past. So this is something very interesting. The strong, importunate feet of time fell soft along these lonely ways, his tightened pace, forgotten and his stark and ruinous rounds. So time, though it is the same time, everywhere, at least the way it ticks, but it is experienced very differently. So when you go to a place which is full of beauty and, wilderness, lonely place, time seems to suddenly expand. Its feet fell soft. It seems to slow down.
And you don't want to leave.
You don't want to leave. So it is like you actually slow down. But otherwise, its round is ruinous. It's like, city life. If you read the data, what happened in a city every day. So their statistics will say so many accidents, some theft, something good. It's a mixed bag, ruinous round. Whereas in wilderness, it is like what happened today, so many flowers bloomed and then, some fell back. So it's not its feet are falling soft. The inner ear that listens to solitude, what a marvelous line it is.
Yes.
We have to tune our ears to listen to solitude. We have forgotten it. So that's why they say that prayer is when you speak to God. Meditation is when you hear Him. So they complement each other. The inner ear that listens to solitude, leaning, self-wrapped, unboundedly could hear the rhythm of the intenser, wordless thought that gathers in the silence behind life. There is a whole passage of Sri Aurobindo about the silence behind life, and that's the reason why time to time in this busy life that we have in cities, she says that that's why monasteries were created, so that people for some time could withdraw into the silence of the solitude. It's a different matter that now even monasteries are invaded by human everything, greed, and because it's a different age we have entered into. But the reason was from the hectic, feverish activity, we would draw for some time when there is inner quietude and we can listen to the wordless thought. This thought which has gone into creation. Not the thought, we are accustomed to thought only through words. But if you really tune, and it's a very simple exercise, actually it doesn't require much effort, that even in the midst of our activity, suddenly something catches our attention, maybe even an outer event, if we don't rush into our consciousness, doesn't rush into judging it, then after a while if we observe it, we'll pass behind the event. And there is something else which is happening out there. There is a space, inner space, quiet inner space. We can do it anywhere. You can do it even in a crowd.
The witness self
Witness
can
self,
do it.
yeah. And if you have some nature's, that's why Mother gives a cure for depression. She gives two of very nature cures. One is that watch fishes in an aquarium. So if you watch it, after a while your mind tends to settle down, quietens. Or she says, look at a flower. Because flowers, if you identify with the consciousness of a flower, then you cannot be depressed, because flower knows only to give. And what it receives from the sun. It doesn't care about human compliments. It doesn't blossom because you are saying, you are good, or, because it has vested interest. It blooms from the sun and the soil, it draws its strength from the elements.
See in America, aquariums in so many doctors' offices, dentists' offices.
Oh, they are multiplying. They are mind created. See, mind has created more disease. Every disease it tries to solve, new will come up, because it doesn't have the final answer and final solution. And at some stage, man has to understand it. But probably after many hitings, now we are moving towards that, being pressured by circumstances. So whether it is diabetes or the latest corona, people are ultimately speaking of their inner immune system, because that's where now inner immune system responds to your states of consciousness. So what the mother has been saying for a long time, we are reaching that, but through a very twisted road.
Dr. Pachakovka and I had a talk on the coronavirus, and he said something very interesting. He quoted Mother. He said that soon there will be a group of people who will be, let me get it correct.
Immune.
They will be immune to this virus, and then like a contagion,
it spreads. It's a well-known principle actually, and the mother speaks about it, that it just needs a group of people to develop the immunity. Now it is very interesting that immunity is known to spread horizontally. It is as contagious and as infectious as the other side. And I think I quote often very humorously when once I met somebody and I had a little attack of flu, and the person said the person had an attack of flu and said, my hands in front. So the person said, no, I'm having a flu, you may catch the flu. I said, maybe you will catch my health. So it is true. A lot of studies in this regard that we can transmit, fear is a contagion, joy and cheerfulness is a contagion. But interesting part about this virus, since you mentioned, see, because people are often asking, so these virus, Mother has spoken about, they are physical, material embodiment of ill-willed adverse forces and forces of the vital world. Exactly. So how do they come into being? So where are these forces thrown? One of her experiences when she went to New Horizon sugar mills, where the sugar cane was being crushed very violently. So she suddenly saw, because it was crushed very violently, a lot of small little vital entities were thrown out. And she wondered that what kind of harm they can give to human beings, because sudden accidents can happen. Because these entities, they are chaotic. They act in a very chaotic way. They bring chaos and disorder. Now if you go to the coronavirus, you will actually see, and SARS for example, you can trace it to these meat markets where it has mushroomed. All kinds of meat, because with this consumption became a very big industry in China. So it's a big lobby. So, but there, because it's suddenly spread like anything, this industry, so different kinds of meats, the lowest kind you can imagine among animals, which actually represent very dark vital forces and energies, that has been brought, and the hygiene is very poor. So their violent killing of some of the livestock, even while they are alive. So this, what it creates is it throws a lot of disintegrating vital forces, especially full of fear and rage, into the atmosphere. And they create a swarm. Like the influenza epidemic in 1918 was because of the disembodied human vital. Here it is the disembodied animal vital. So this then rides on these material entities and attacks human beings who are open. So how do human beings open? There has to be something corresponding to these energies. So, if now energies of snake, bat, I don't need to specify what kind of energies, but in general, state of, fear, depression, suspicion. You see, snake is a very afraid creature. Everybody is afraid of snake, but snake is extremely afraid. It hides in a hole. It will not normally venture out in open spaces. It's very afraid. And it throws fear. You see a snake and you feel afraid because of that. So, by fear and all these things, we open our doors. But equally by cheerfulness, by trust, we shut the doors to these energies and reinforce our subtle physical envelope. So, glad, it came up because people keep asking about
very good.
Our take on the coronavirus. So, coronavirus antidote is Karuna. So, on an aside, I think maybe it's some Bengali who named it Corona. Sounds very Bengalish, And literally it's saying don't do it. So, coronavirus, we should say don't, stay away. So, anyway, so we come to this beautiful listening to solitude. And the low, sweet, we should listen to silence behind life. It's a very good exercise. A beautiful meditation, we can go to such spaces, or we can just tune into the silence behind life. We can do it in our room. So many places it can be done. And the low, sweet, inarticulate voice of earth, in the great passion of her sun-kissed trance, ascended with its yearning undertone. You see, the Red Indians can actually tune into the voice of the earth. And they knew many things. That faculty has been lost now. So, by tuning to the earth, there's so much one can gather. Afar from the brute noise of clamorous needs, we call them needs, there is a touch of humor here, satire. Needs that clamor around. Oh, I need this. Have we got ourselves? Oh, I need this. Oh, I need that. Mother says once, they were discussing with somebody to go out somewhere backpacking. So they were discussing what are the minimum things we need. So one of them said, well, I need just a toothbrush. So mother says that he had not come to India, otherwise he would have said we don't need toothbrush also. Clamorous needs, like we build up, they are artificial, they are not really required. Clamorous needs. So this place is far from that. You can't have an AC in nature, clamorous needs. In the great passion of her sun-kissed trance, ascended with its yearning undertone. You can feel the aspiration of the earth there. The quieted, all-seeking mind could feel at rest from its blind outwardness of will. So will is rushing out in a typical city. And the mother says that how much more effort of grace will be required to pull the life of people who are plunged in darkness in the cities. She speaks of that. And then she gives this in prayers and meditation. In Paris, she speaks about, take for example a city like Paris. It is surrounded by desire. We look at Paris, oh wonderful, an evening in Paris. But she says it's surrounded by desires and it's so difficult. All cities are around money and power. They have grown up around that. And so will is constantly moving outward, outwardness of will. But here in these spaces, there is nothing to distract you. Even your phone very often doesn't pick up your mobile tower, So what do? The will turns inward, inwardness of will. So that's beautifully described what happens in these places. The unwearied clasp of her mute, patient love, and know for a soul the mother of her forms. So earth is alive, there we feel it. She is a living, conscious soul. There is a soul of earth. And she is the mother of her forms. From her, all the forms are built. And when do we experience it? When our will turns inwards, our vital is quietened from the noise of clamorous needs all the time. I must have this, I must have that. When our mind is quieted from all these outward running thoughts, that's when we can feel the clasp, unwearied clasp. She never tired of holding us, of her mute, patient love. We are born in her, we step on her, we sleep on her, and even when we leave our body, she receives us in her lap. So, unwearied clasp of her patient love. This is Mother Earth. This spirit stumbling in the fields of sense. Again, marvelous line. We call it reality. But it's a reality created by the senses and something else which we don't know. So, fields of sense. And that's where we stumble. Here, there, everywhere. This spirit stumbling in the fields of sense, this creature bruised in the mortar of the days. Mortar, Okhli, where Hindi they say, Okhli mein sir diya, musal se kya dana, where you'll be crushed, the cement, when people make cement, or even the small Okhli is used for, mortar is used for grinding a grain. So, this life that we lead, where our being, our consciousness is like in the mortar of the days, it's crushed by the daily burdening needs and cares, could find inner broad spaces of release. So there one could discover the soul. That's why even now this is a remedy, that time to time we must take time out and withdraw into these spaces. Ideal is if we discover the inner spaces. That's wonderful. And we are, of course, super fortunate to have the Samadhi of Mother and Sri Aurobindo right here. But if not, then at least time to time one should stay away little far from the madding crowd and find a place where, if places are still left untouched by human care. Not yet was a world all occupied by care. So with man comes the burden of care. Man lifts the burden of fate. Even animal consciousness is burdened by care. It is instinct. But with human beings, an ant will accumulate for the rainy season, but it's not burdened by care. But human beings will accumulate not only for the rainy season, but for all the seasons of even grandchildren. So we are naturally burdened with care, which grandchildren will throw away. That's a different story. The bosom of her mother kept for us still her austere regions and her musing depths, her impersonal reaches, lonely and inspired, and the mightinesses of her rapture haunts. So that is an age, Sri Aurobindo is describing, there are spaces where it's not easy to go. She has still kept austere regions. One of the places where only one person lives near Madhuban, Mountain Paradise. You have to go in the morning, come back by evening. Now Bruce doesn't live there. But he used to stay alone. And you can't, he didn't like people staying there overnight. So it belonged to Sri Aurobindo Ashram, Delhi. Now I think our Pondicherry Ashram has taken it. And I don't know what is the arrangement now.
Gerard was there for many years.
Gerard was there for many years. So austere heights, you have to, almost 2 hours of climb. So like that, there is no other way you can reach there. So there are spaces still in nature which are kept, haunts, where you can go and once again connect with the soul of nature. Muse-lipped, she nursed her symbol mysteries and guarded for her pure-eyed sacraments the valley clefts between her breasts of joy. How beautifully Sri Aurobindo uses, images, those valleys where, I remember once in that CHN area going to a place called Thois, and stretches of land where no habitation. And I remember walking 10 kilometers without seeing a single soul. Or at night, because the moon tends to, come up pretty late, and the sun drowns early because it's a valley. It's about 13,000 feet. And at night to go in all those, jackets, going out through, they only have rosewoods, nothing else, no other plantation. It's all desert and stones, and miles you can walk. uninterrupted. And such a joy. I mean, that was the time when synthesis and this was so, So, such places are worth exploring, and they are important till one finds the inner soul space. Then you don't need, you can be in your. And that starts when we begin to feel lonely, even in a crowd. Not lonely, but we can be alone. Lonely is a little weak word, but alone. So that's why the sign of a person getting ready for spiritual life is that even in a crowd we are alone. Because now you are coming in touch with some inner space. And through that we can enter into these valley clefts. Her mountain altars for the fires of dawn. So now the yagna is going on in nature. And where is the altar? Mountain altars. Where the first rays of light touch and a fire is kindled. All grew a consecration and a rite. Air was vibrant, a link between earth and heaven, vibrant as a link between earth and heaven. The winds are the mantras, by priestly wind, the mantras are chanting. So this is the yagna of nature, which we find mentioned in the Gita. But Sri Aurobindo makes it so vivid and so beautiful. It draws, And nuptial beaches, where the ocean caused, and the huge chanting of her prophet woods. As winds pass through the woods, there is that sound which comes. So they are chanting, and nuptial beaches where the sea is meeting the land, the marriage between, and also marriage between the sea and the sky, and marriage between the sea and land, or rivers and land. So such spaces one could withdraw. Yes, please.
Fields had she of her solitary earth, plains hushed and happy in the embrace of light, alone with the cry of birds and hue of flowers, and wildernesses of wonder lit by her moons, and grey sear evenings kindling with the stars, and dim movement in the night's infinitude.
Beautiful. So
august, exulting in her Maker's eye, she felt her nearness in him, in earth's breast, conversed still with the light behind the veil, still communed with eternity beyond.
And we can say that all this till man came on the scene. That is what Mother describes.
Yes,
it's the paradise lost. She says that as mind came, but the early humanity was not like that. She says that it was still in communion with nature. It lived with that. There was spontaneity, there was a joy. There was no conception of sin and virtue and vice. But as mind developed, it brought in dualities, ego, the struggle. But it is a passage. She says we have to go through it. But she says when we look at it from that purity of life, it's a great fall. See, in an animal life, in the life of a jungle, and she's talking of even the unhuman tract is the description. So even perhaps before animal life has come into existence, there are spaces, the Amazon, the famous, not the store, but the original Amazon.
It's interesting, those people in the Amazon, the forerunners, they would cut a small area to use for their livelihood, and when they had finished, they would move on, let it regrow, and begin another area.
Yeah.
There was never any clear cutting, no clear cutting whatsoever. Now we see it thousands of acres a day.
Also, they had very interesting, like in Africa, the tribes, they used to live like, there will be a huge mountain, then there would be spaces where the tribes are occupying. So in Africa, when the so-called civilized world went and created nation, they don't even now have a clear sense of nation. You'll wonder why, because the idea of nation is a very, mind, as it develops, it creates the idea of nation. But for the tribes, it was a tribe and the boundary of the tribes, and they got together and they said, okay, fine. But if you arbitrarily draw a line, they don't understand it. So it was literally like confluence of tribes which had some similar beliefs. You can actually go there and experience how nation unit developed over a period of time.
Yes.
the first formations of tribes which were culturally little bit, similar. So you see the cultural unity actually coming before there is a physical boundary. Actually, what Sri Aurobindo describes in, human cycle.
Human cycle.
Plains, hushed and happy in the embrace of light. No, before that, this lovely line. Fields had she offered solitary mirth. She is now Mother Earth. Solitary, where she is just smiling and happy. Solitary. There is no creature has gone there. Plains hushed and happy in the embrace of light, alone with the cry of birds and you of flowers. See, birds and flowers, again, they are soul forces. So we can see when earth is untouched with all these other deadly things which have come, and wildernesses of wonder lit by her moons and grey seer evenings kindling with the stars and dim movement in the night's infinitude. August, exulting in her maker's eye. She is trying to match the maker, the Lord, Creator. Look here, it's me. To draw the maker closer to her, that's her way of, August, exulting in her maker's eye. She felt her nearness to him in earth's breast, conversed still with the light behind the veil, still communed with eternity beyond. So this is the early age of earth and, before mind developed humanity. Humanity is there, but it's not. So those spaces she has come, which are still untouched by the, mobile towers and the TV signals and computers, still that humanity.
A few and fit inhabitants, she called.
She is now all Savitri. She is traveling through these, she is meeting earth, and now she is calling.
To share the glad communion of her peace, the breadth, the summit were their natural home. The strong king sages, from their labor done, freed from the warrior tension of their task, came to her serene sessions in these wilds. The strife was over. The respite lay in front.
So this is very interesting. This is, as I said, Savitri is going, but this is about Mother Earth. She is calling. Whom is she calling? Few and fit inhabitants.
Yes.
Not everybody. So who are these fit inhabitants which are worthy of, being her children? A few and fit inhabitants she called to share the glad communion of her peace. So they can come and dwell in that peace, and the breadth, the summit were their natural home. So these beings who came there, their inner consciousness was vast and dwelling on the heights of their own inner nature. And who are these people? The strong king sages from their labor done. Raj Rishis, who are, warriors. So after those, they would draw back here to breathe this atmosphere. All the ashramas when we read in Ramayana and Mahabharata, where these kings went for a while and stayed there and breathed that air and then went back. Usually the hermitages of gurus, the story of King Janak who would withdraw one to Yagnavalk, another Janak whose guru is Ashtavakra. Janak is a lineage of kings. So there, even when Lord Rama travels through the jungle, he goes to different ashramas. And there is a beautiful description at different places how they would go. So the strong king sages, all these they have done, they have battled and they have looked after the kingdom. Time to time they would go there for respite. Freed from the warrior tension of their task, came to her serene sessions in these wilds. Who was holding the sessions? Mother Earth. Serene sessions. And what was her way? Sit and be in this quietude. You will have a natural meditation. Serene sessions. The strife was over, the respite lay in front. Happy they lived with birds and beasts and flowers and sunlight and the rustle of the leaves, and heard the wild winds wandering in the night. They had the relaxing music in the form of the river and the winds at night, and some places you can still hear. Again, this African jungle, the savannas. So near Nairobi, it's on the Tanzania border, and it's very interesting, to stay in a camp at night. So at the, it's a grace, these experiences. So I stayed at night. Now the interesting, it's real jungle with all those lions and tigers and all the deadly animals which are all around you. But inside it's like a 5-star accommodation. So cost is also like that. But the beauty is you can actually hear at night the movement and even the animals, and you can actually hear, and they won't come near. There are guards and outside. You don't know, how they are keeping a watch and visit. But that's how you can, those sessions. So where you have the winds blowing through, winds wandering in the night, mused with the stars in their mute constant rank, and lost in the mornings as in azure tents, and with the glory of the noons were one. And when you wake up, you suddenly wonder, it's so quiet. You wonder what happened, all those sounds, and where have all that gone? And then in the morning it is the azure, and then glory of the noons. So they were growing through nature. So actually nature itself is a great teacher. Mother Earth has created such fields where we can naturally go and for some time and breathe that joy and come back. So
some deeper plunge from life's external clasp, beckoned into a fiery privacy in the soul's unprofaned star-white recess. They sojourned with an everlasting bliss, an ever-living bliss, a voice profound in the ecstasy and the hush they heard, beheld an all-revealing light. All time-made difference they overcame. The world was fibered with their own heartstrings, close drawn to the heart that beats in every breast. They reached the one self in all through boundless love.
So you see these spaces where you can withdraw and be in solitude. See how the Divine Mother has created. If you see the ashram life, on the one side, it's here, intense activity, and it's humming with everything modern which you can imagine. But very few people are aware. People who are regular visitors to ashram or who live here, they obviously know. Even though many have not visited the gardens of the ashram. Yes. You have the lake estate. Recently we had the video circulating of our governor. You have Marway, you have Nandanam, you have, of course, Auroville, many spaces like that. You have Medhananda's garden. Many gardens, there must be 8 to 10. And when people used to lose their head, mind, the mother would sometimes send them to lake estate. Because here it's very intense. So go a little far, withdraw into those spaces. Parichanda's garden, these gardens were named like that. And there's so many interesting stories about these gardens. Where people could go and after some time come back. And Medhananda's garden, I just remember once, I was offered that if I could stay there and we could have all the crazy people there. So I said, okay, wherever mother sends me. We went there, the person was looking after. I said, so how is this place? Lovely place, everything. Not to forget Kasno. So he said, lovely place. I also liked it. I said, just casually I asked, are there snakes there? Yeah, there are snakes. I said, okay, what kind? Said, cobra. The other day there was a cobra. I can see the... So I said, how many? He sure exaggerated, but he said maybe 70, 80. So it was a test of Samta. I said, I have said yes. Brother, living with cobras, my path is of Krishna, not of Shiva. I believe in Ananda, sweetness, where this ascetic kind of spirituality. I thought maybe contrary nature you have to develop. Ascetic at heart is fine, but outer asceticism. So, fortunately, the whole plan dropped. Of course, slightly I had played a little trick, telling them that when he asked how is it, I said wherever mother sends fine. Only I am worried about the patient living with the snakes. So, but there's so many gardens and there are people living there. I mean, Casino where these graves, samadhis actually, they are great beings. Not only the Satya Karma and I recommend many people who come here, they should, time to time, they should go there and see. Even our society, Matrikunj, lovely places.
Udar and Mona are there.
Yeah. So, Udar and Mona, even they have kept space for some others. So, it's wonderful, to be these spaces. He knew this need which may come in human beings. And so, within ashrams, he has created. And strangely, these places are still untouched by that, especially if you go to some of the lake estate, you can actually get lost inside without really feeling. So, she has taken care of everything. Some deeper plunged from life's external clasp, beckoned into a fiery privacy. In the soul's unprofaned, star-white recess, they sojourned with an ever-living bliss. A voice profound in the ecstasy and the hush, they heard, beheld an all-revealing light. So some use this space to just plunge within themselves in a deep meditation where they discover the original bliss. So the joy we find in nature is, if you use the language of the Gita, the divine in the Sharo Bhav. In immutable things there is the immutable presence, which you can feel in nature. And so you feel that harsh, that joy there. And you can feel it in nature as long as you don't encounter a human being, especially a highly intellectual human being. But otherwise in nature you can feel. Even simple human beings, you feel that great joy inside them. I feel it when I meet some of those village ladies, old, they don't know much language. You meet them, you feel like just embracing them because they are so full of that, still that touch is there in nature. But later on that, it is lost. That's what the mind does. So what it does, it creates differences. Mind and time as it grows, develops. So what happened to them? All time made difference they overcame. All the differences that come through process of evolution, the different races, nationalities, language barriers, all these which have come much later. The original humanity was conscious only of their aspiration. So that's why when Mother was asked, what is how can we realize human unity? She said humanity can realize unity by becoming conscious of their origin. So the great game, fortunately, very frankly, in Sanatan Dharma, we are always connected with the origin, the seers and sages who wandered, aspiring, and they also were connected. They speak of forefathers. Okay, but when you have something like a religion starting at a point of time, then you are disconnected. Because that's your origin. Now, if that's your origin, you cannot connect with the ultimate origin of earth and creation and humanity. That original aspiration is difficult to embody. So these people overcame the time-made differences. The world was fibered with their own heartstrings. It was vibrating with love. It was wired with heart, not with the mind. Mother at one place says, mind divides, heart unites. When people love each other, they suddenly forget all the differences till the mind steps in and brings in this and that and caste and creed and color and God knows what. Close drawn to the heart that beats in every breast, they reached the one self in all through boundless love. What a path. Whole path of yoga. Be in nature, plunge within, discover the one self and open the doors of the heart to the universal love which is vibrating and pulsating in this creation. And through that heart, unite with all. It's a whole path of yoga in few lines. We will see different paths here. The king sages, then this kind of yogis who plunged into meditation and in the depths of the heart they discovered the one self which is the universal self in all things and beings. Attuned to silence and to the world rhyme, they loosened the knot of the imprisoning mind. So, in that silence they could This mind that constantly ties us with 100 cares and anxieties and fear. That's why in the Gita, when Asuri Sampada, one of that is tied by 1,000 anxieties. One of the description is an Asuric action that makes man filled with all the time with 100 things. So I have to do this, I have to achieve that, this problem, that difficulty. Much of it is self-created by the mind, something which may never ever be experienced. So when they went there, they were suddenly, this knot got loosened. Achieved was the wide, untroubled witness gaze. Unsealed was nature's great spiritual eye. To the height of heights rose now their daily climb. Truth leaned to them from a supernal realm. Above them blazed eternity's mystic suns. You can read a few more lines. Isn't it that today it looks like time is flowing slow? Several times I have looked at my watch that we have read. So it's actually, I'm sure many of us are experiencing that so much is gone, but it's still, there's still time. So, magic of Savitri. Nameless, then beyond it. So there are different kinds of paths. This, another path. Nameless, the austere ascetics without home. There are those which have left their home and they are living on trees. Like in Auroville, sometimes you'll find people living on trees. And somebody from the city, when he comes and he is very attracted, says, I want to live on a tree house in Auroville. So the person comes and tells me, I was living in a tree house. I said, how many days you could actually live? Oh, one night I lived. Who was your companion? So the person says that I was there along with the not so friendly dog, because the owner had gone away and the dog was there. So the condition was that you can live in the house, but the dog will stay with you. And one night was an eerie night. Now it's because you are not tuned to it. But if you are tuned to it, you will find very difficult to sleep in a typical 5-star hotel after you have lived in that kind of, silence. So, nameless, the austere ascetics without home, abandoning speech and motion and desire, aloof from creatures, sat absorbed, alone. So they were sitting away, no contact, nothing. Aniket, Anamaya, Anashrita, all those terms we have in the Gita. Sarva Sankalpa Sannyasi, abandoning motion. So they are not driven by any desire, nothing. Immaculate in tranquil heights of self, on concentration's luminous voiceless peaks, world naked hermits with their matted hair. These are the Naga Sannyasis in the real sense. They have thrown away, neither they are wearing dress, nothing else. And they are sitting naked, world naked. Look at it. This is the real meaning of Digambara. So Digambar is who? He is using the sky as the robe. World naked. They are stripped of all worldly things. So they are only holding the sky as the robe. World naked hermits with their matted hair, immobile as the passionless great hills. Around them grouped like thoughts of some vast mood, awaiting the infinite's behest to end. So they are absorbed with these hills around, which are equally passionless, and they're waiting to be absorbed in the infinite. Now, the interesting part is, if you notice, very tempting places, but this is not where Savitri finds her ideal mate. These are not the samples for the yoga of transformation, but they are great beings, different paths. Sri Aurobindo is making us aware. So we meet tomorrow.
And tomorrow will be our last meeting for almost 5 months. And then we'll have 7-8 months of continuous Savitri.
Yes, beautiful. It's lovely. Actually, it's such a joy. Don't feel it's a reading or anything. It's just bathing in that atmosphere. Okay, namaste.